Welcome to the show, everyone. I'm JJ Flazanes, your host. Thank you for downloading today's episode. Today we're going to talk about safe conversations. And this is again with Harville Hendrix. This is third time on the show, and Helen LaKelly Hunt. It's her second time on the show. And I just want to make a few announcements before I get into the show and into their bios. We talk about an event that they're doing, and there was a little bit of a misunderstanding about what they needed and how I could help them. And so I'm here to just tell you up front that they are doing a live event on March 21st, and it may or may not be on the website yet, but it's going to be a live streaming event for free. They're going to be working with couples, people, everybody, at a location that I believe is in Dallas. So if anyone's in Dallas, please go to safeconversations.org immediately if you'd like to be in that room, where they're going to workshop what we're going to talk about today in Safe Conversations. The live stream is available for everyone around the globe, absolutely free, and it's going to be a 4-hour event, and that's on March 21st, and the link is just go to safeconversations.org, but there will be more detailed links in the show notes. Also, what I didn't realize, Helen and Harville have been on the show now a few times, and they always do video. We always want to do video. And Helen was moving around some papers a few times. So if you hear shuffling going on, I didn't actually ask her to stop because I didn't think it'd continue. So I was able to cut out a lot of it, but there are times where you're going to hear a little bit of shuffling. So I apologize about that. They obviously do a lot of video. And when you do video, it's not a big deal. But obviously on audio podcasts, it's a focal point. I also want to mention that between my live stream on Facebook I did for the launch of Health and Wealth and a bunch of other questions that have come up in the Inner Circle membership, which, by the way, I probably really butchered not being very clear with all of you. I have 2 inner circles. The first inner circle is the mastermind, which nobody can get into right now anyway. It's full and we're in process. But then there's the Inner Circle membership, which is $9.99 a month. And in that Inner Circle, there's a whole nother podcast specifically for the Inner Circle. We do once a month group coaching, and it's a very active private Facebook group. And what's come up on our group coaching is the use of Imago therapy. And so I've been talking about it more and more, as I normally do. And I've decided that I'm going to do a 4-week Imago, creating your Imago course, if you will. I mean, I'm not an Imago certified therapist, but I can take you through the exercise that I always talk about, that I'm always promoting, and workshop how I use it and why I think it's important for individuals to do as well as couples. And that's going to be in May. So I'm just putting it out there, letting you know that since you're listening to Harville and Helen today, and Safe Conversations was born out of the Imago work and the couples dialogue, that we're going to be doing in not only in the Inner Circle, but in a course that I'll do a 4-week Imago sort of basic training of how to use it as an individual and how to use it to heal some of your core wounds. So hopefully you'll be interested in that. And I, of course, want to mention that I'm doing an astrology course starting March 10th, which is next week. And if you're interested in that, go to jjflazanes.com. The link is below in the show notes to register for the astrology course, where there will be also live coaching happening there, as well as very detailed information about all kinds of things astrology in order to create compassion in your relationships. So now on to today's show. Harville Hendrix and Helen LaKelly Hunt, both Ph.D s, are internationally respected couples therapists, educators, speakers, and New York Times best-selling authors. Together, they have written over 10 books with more than 4 million copies sold, including the timeless classic, Getting the Love You Want, a guide for couples. In addition, Harville has appeared on the Oprah Winfrey television program 17 times. You've heard about them before. The rest of their bios in the show notes. I hope you enjoy today's show. Welcome, everyone, to today's show. I am thrilled to once again have Harville Hendrix and Helen LaKelly Hunt. We are going to talk about safe conversations today. This is our third conversation that came out of what I'm going to say the Imago therapy model. I will be correct in saying that, correct, guys? Yes. Okay. Well, welcome back to the show, first and foremost. Thank you for being here.
An honor to be here.
Yes, we're delighted to see you, and what a beaming face you have.
Thank you. Thank you. Well, I love having these conversations with you. I really believe that the work you do is some of the most powerful, transformative work that not only a couple can do, but literally an individual can do. And I have experienced the teachings both from the books, from the workbooks, from counseling, and coming to your live event at Esalen earlier in January 2019. And I love having these deep conversations with you, which are, a depth at which most people aren't having conversations about relationships. And it's really needed, especially in today's age with the amount of anxiety and depression and suicides. And it's like an epidemic that we aren't talking about emotions. We aren't talking about feelings, because in my opinion and the way life works is everything we do in life is because we want to feel better. Every choice we make is about us wanting to feel better. And if we can't feel better in relationship and we have no tools to help make that possible in all relationships, now we feel stuck, which is what I think is some of the root of anxiety and depression and suicide and all of that. So today's conversation, Safe Conversations, came out of Doug and I doing the work with you, our last conversation about dethroning the therapist that we had probably in February, and taking this work from the couple's situation into other relationships. And so if I'm correct, and then I'm gonna set the stage for you and I'm gonna let you go. Safe Conversations came out of the couple's dialogue that you created in Imago Therapy, correct? Okay, let's talk about how that happened, how that came to be, why take it out of couples dialogue. Was there a specific situation or people who had said, hey, we want this, or did you just start using your model on different relationships?
Yeah. So you want to go with that? Or?
This is Harville's idea that every year the relational science becomes simpler to teach. And he said, this needs to be everywhere. It's just like, it is excellent in therapy, but it could also, what if it's taught in school, in kindergarten? It's teachable for the first time. Kindergartners love this stuff. And then when you apply for a marriage license, it should be like a driver's license. You should take a test, pass the test, learn some skills, so you don't have a wreck when you get married. And so it was totally his idea, and it is every day is so joyful because we get to try to share it with other populations.
And what I would add to that in terms of why take it out of the clinic is we discovered that in the therapy process, we kept looking for what's the active agent. And sort of like acetaminophen, sort of like Tylenol. What's the active agent in Tylenol? Well, it's a thing called acetaminophen. So what in therapy actually changes people? And we discovered and practiced for a couple of decades the traditional therapy process of exploring your inner world, exploring your dreams, exploring your memories, and coming to understand yourself and seeing how your behaviors in the present reflect your experiences in the past, and to have some insight. And we found that that's helpful, and it educates people about understanding their behavior, but it didn't change the way they behaved. So we finally isolated that what actually changed the relationship was not what couples understood, but what they did. And what they did was practice what we called a dialogue process. They talked to each other in a different way. And one day it occurred to me, and I talked to Helen about this, the dialogue, we can dispense with all the other therapy stuff. The dialogue is what changes couples. And in workshops, that's primarily what we teach people to do, and that's what they practice. And there are transformations in a workshop in one weekend. You went to a weekend, and you saw it's fundamentally not about the complexities of therapy, but about the practice of how to talk. So it occurred to me that this could be taught to everybody, and if everybody would practice a dialogue process, that we would change culture. And so we decided we would do a social experiment and start a social movement, rename dialogue Safe Conversations and start teaching dialogue under that name to everybody. And we're finding that our anticipation about that is true. We 2 days ago, we were in Austin, where the room was full of the heads of organizations and corporations, all different kinds of organizations and corporations. And we had, 3 hours of input about this. And everybody in the room comes up later and says, this is transformative. And I look at Helen and say, people say this is, I really don't get it. I think it's because I've been with it, and Helen and I worked with it for so long, we don't realize how this tastes. But when somebody's new to it and they finally experience being heard, or that they can talk without being criticized, that they feel listened to without being judged, and they experience engagement, social engagement at a level that they feel safe all the time, something happens in their brains that doesn't happen if they engaged in a more analytic process or in a more confrontational process or even a strategic planning process. This is an engagement with another human being in such a way that you feel safe with them. And when you feel safe, so we're beginning to understand that safety is non-negotiable for human striving. And we've picked up on there's research on that by Stephen Porges that I'm sure you've probably heard of as a researcher. I forgot now where he is at the moment, but something like Washington University, some Washington University, and he moved around, and who spent 35 years studying the vagal system in the brain. And his outcome was the vagal system monitors the safety or danger of your environment. And when the vagal system says it's dangerous, then all you can do is be defensive and protective, but you don't thrive. And when you're safe, the vagal system says, hey, we can come out and play. It's okay, the sun is out. And a whole new set of neurochemicals are released, a whole new set of behaviors are released. You want to engage with other people, and it is, in fact, social engagement that makes a difference. Then everything in you works. Your immune system works. You have fewer illnesses. Your emotions, there's an affective flow instead of blockage and suppression. Your mind works better, and you'll live longer if you're safe in your social environments. So we said, well, not only do we want to bring this to the culture, this out of the clinic, but we want to insert it into the whole planet. So we decided to, it's sort of grandiose, to take on 7.8 billion people as our market. And social movements tend to take 40 years to produce a tipping point, big ones. Some take 70. The women's movement took about 40 years to reach a tipping point from 1848. What would that be? And then it was almost the end of the 19th century, and then it took another 20 years to get the vote. So that was a tipping point that finally matured into the vote. So we've looked at movements, and they tend to take anywhere from about 20 to 40 to 70 years to reach a tipping point in that ecosystem, in that population. So we figured that this will take 40 years to reach 3.2 billion people, which will be a planetary tipping point. And then we assume that the rest of the culture will roll over, and we will become a relational civilization, and we'll have moved the human race into the next stage of human evolution. Now, we won't do this by ourselves, obviously. We're simply one voice, and other people are lining up in their own ways to bring relationship into the consciousness of the culture. And we're doing it in different things, but one of the unique things we add to it is the technology of conversation. And we have that research has now on that has been done by a third party, unbeknownst to us, that establishes that there is a type of conversation that does what we talk about. It helps you connect, helps your immune system work better, your brain works better, you live longer. And so we've had, and this came out of Harvard, so there's now independent research that what we've been talking about as the power of safe conversation is in fact an empirically validated fact. So that we pick up steam on that and say, we don't even have to explain ourselves anymore. We just have to do this and get those 3.2 billion people into the Safe Conversation fold. So that's kind of what Safe Conversation is in a nutshell. We can leverage it out a little bit as we go. You want to add to all that? But what I would like to add is that I may be kind of the idea person here, sort of, and Helen is a co-idea person, so she does that. But what Helen has brought to Safe Conversations is knowledge about how to create and sustain social movements, because she's done 3 of them in the women's movement. So she works about 70 hours a week making this wagon run, and I work a similar amount of time on what the content is that goes on the wagon. Yeah. So we have this partnership of, I can put the watermelon, but I need a wagon. Helen builds the wagon, I put the watermelon on it. And we just hired somebody who actually now knows how to drive the bus. So we
got a couple of vehicles, a bus and a wagon. But anyway, it's very joyful work. I mean, to imagine distributing something that would prevent so much unnecessary suffering, that's what I get to do. I go to bed each night. I may be tired, but I am so joyful being able to be married to Harville.
Oh, what a compliment. And well, the beautiful thing is that being married to Helen is a privilege as well as a pleasure, because we are truly a polarity. She is clearly a right brain, intuitive thinker, and she gives me so much credit for coming up with all this stuff, but actually Helen has an intuition about what is important, but she doesn't fill it with value or elaborate it and develop it into, 10 or 20 paragraphs. It's like one sentence. And so something happens to me. It's like, like zero negativity. Helen came up with that process. She came up with dialogue in 1977. And then I pick it up because it's interesting, and I'm a kind of construction engineer, and I'll take it and practice it with the population and say, oh, look at that. If you tailor it a little bit this way and shift it a little bit that way, produces this outcome. And eventually I turn an intuition into a system. And then you can teach the system. And that's what we discovered, we're excited about. We can teach this process to anybody. We've taught it to people in South Dallas with no education, to immigrants who can hardly speak English, or some who can't speak English, who are fully Spanish, because it's not esoteric, it's not abstract, it's very concrete. You say this, here's how you do the dialogue process. Is now a good time to talk? Let me see if I got it. Did I get it? Is there more about that? That makes sense, and what makes sense is, and I can imagine you might feel the empathic statement. You can teach people those sentence stems, and then they can talk with each other or other people about any topic. We don't care about the topic. We care about how you talk about the topic. And we find that people with varying political differences can talk without polarizing. People with different spiritual differences can talk without polarizing. And those two things usually always produce polarization. But if you hold them in the dialogue process, they actually transcend their polarization and begin to see each other's validity. That even a Trump supporter makes sense to a non-Trump supporter. If you listen long enough, they have a rational reason why. And the other person has a rational reason why not. Both are correct. But if you listen to each other, you move to empathy instead of polarization. Then you can say, well, how can we work together to make a better civilization? But if you don't do that, then you just polarize, and then you add to the chaos that's already in our culture. So that's sort of what we want to do, is contribute to creating a way for people to do social engagement so that they connect and can communicate about and beyond their differences. And that way, we think, will ultimately create a relational civilization and move the human race forward to its next stage of human evolution. Somebody's got to do it.
Someone has got to do it. I'm trying to help too. I've got my own thing cooking. I'm trying to help too. Don't worry, guys. I'm having you on for this very reason, right? So, because this is important to me. Again, like I said, from the very first time, Harville, you and I had that show together, and how much I had learned just from the Creating Your Imago process as an individual, and how important I thought that was just in regular therapy with just one person. I just couldn't understand why this is the first time I'm actually doing this. And it really changed my perspective about what was possible in both individual counseling or therapy. And then, of course, when you get into the dynamic of having the couples therapy. Now, and then moving on to the conversation that the four of us had about dethroning the therapist after we did Getting the Love That You Want at Esalen with you guys in January. And Doug and I, having worked the couples dialogue many times since then, and having it be such an easy process, I'm now wanting to focus a little bit more on this, on the conversation, the safe conversation piece, because in a relationship, especially between, partners, whatever gender or sexual orientation they may be, there's a commitment level, there's a desire level, I want this to work with you. That's why I chose you. And I'm very invested in this relationship. So when it comes to, okay, I'm starting to have feelings and now I'm feeling like, oh, it's time to have a couples dialogue. Let's go get the script. I want to, first of all, go from when using the safe conversation model, like I'd love to know how you teach it in corporations or with children, because, what point do you coach someone or let them know what the cues are that they're starting to feel triggered or emotions or they're in need of using the script? And are you still teaching that they always use the script?
Yeah, what we tend to, our current methodology is a workshop, so that we have anywhere from about 15 or 20 up to 400 or 500 people in a workshop. And so that's a group teaching process. But in that process, we have what we call the dyadic conversation, two people talking, whether they are in a corporation or whether they're a couple. We have the script, and we say to them that they have to do it by the script, because it is, and I think this is a language that's helped us, is that it is a skill, and all skills have to be done precisely a certain way and have to be repeated over and over again. Like if you were going to play tennis, there's a muscle in the arm, set of muscles here. If you don't train those muscles, you can never get the ball over the court. If you hold a tennis racket when it feels natural, you will not play tennis. You have to hold it in a way that feels unnatural and hold it in place while you swing your hand. And if you hold it at the little tiny angle that requires, you'll always hit the ball over the net. But you have to practice until your brain does that automatically, rather than having to think every time, I got to hold my hand a certain way, because you can't really play tennis if you're thinking about playing tennis. You have to play tennis once your hand is automatic. So we think it's the same skill practice process in the dialogue process, so that we ask people not to worry about content. We'll give you a topic, or you can come up with your own. We don't care what you have to worry about. It's like, we don't care which tennis court you play on. We just want you to play tennis according to our rules. Now we know if you do, you'll win, or you'll get the ball over the net and you'll have fun. But if you don't, the ball will go everywhere and you won't have any fun, and you certainly won't win. So yes, we teach the script. People complain about that. You notice that, but as we have more and more languaged it as a skill, like a game, people get that because they've skied, or they learn tennis or some other kind of ping pong or whatever they've learned. And they know you have to be precise, do the exercise over and over again until it hurts. And then eventually it'll integrate and you'll do it automatically. So we teach that whether in the old days in therapy, you had to do the same thing. People they sit down and they want to talk about their sex life. Well, I don't care what they talk about. You just have to talk about it this way. And eventually they found that the talking about it this way dealt with the issue of their sex life without them having to deal with the issue of the sex life. Because it was the way they talked to each other that created a sexual problem or an intimacy problem or whatever other the conflict. That process itself changes the relationship. And in the process, Helen pointed out one day that, and this was another one of your big insights, is that when you do the dialogue process, you also move back and forth in your brain from the amygdala to the lower brain to the prefrontal cortex, and your brain integrates.
Yeah, and if I could add, there's one thing I would correct or say differently than you did. So yes, we teach this as a workshop, but we also are getting it out in other ways. And because some people have been trained to do it, and they take it to their house of workshop.
House of worship.
House of worship, and they're working with maybe some couples that are struggling. Or there's the homeless population, low-income families. We are at the cusp of creating digital programs that are going to teach this. For example, in addition to the dialogue process, we talk about zero negativity. It's not what you say, it's how you say it. That you can handle any of your issues that you're mad about in a way that it doesn't land as negatively on who you're talking to. And if it doesn't land as negatively, they're more likely to help you solve the problem. Mm-hmm. And we really love the idea of zero negative families. In fact, our family was very, 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 very troubled. Oh my goodness. We love teaching this, and sometimes we didn't do it at home. And there was a daughter of ours that said, okay, Harville's been on Oprah, so we want to go on Oprah and tell the viewing audience what y'all are really like and what our home is really like and everything. But anyway, so that's all turned around. And recently we got an email from her. We're all getting together on Christmas Day, and there's a reason that it's on Christmas Day. We're going to spend a week doing something really unusual. But she was the one that's this very same person said, now everybody who comes, we have to get a commitment to zero negativity before we come. We will have no negativity while we're together. Wasn't that something that yes. She did that? Because she just thought we were hopeless. And the family's hopeless. And the family's now all... So and I tell that story if anyone's listening and they go, oh, Harville's talking about this, that, and the other. Maybe that works for him and Helen and maybe their kids. But our family is yuck. Well, we had a yuck family too for a while. And it's turned around. The technology of dialogue and zero negativity, that's all. It's the two things that you really have to know to have a transformed relationship. So it is workshops, but it's also, we're beginning to get it out in other ways.
Well, I want to focus a little bit on, let's say, workplaces and educational facilities with children. And when I asked, and I know, and I'm loving all of your answers. When I asked, like, how do you teach this? I meant in that, in couples therapy, again, that whole, like, they're committed to each other. So they're looking for ways to connect or do things differently, or how to handle when it doesn't, or when they don't feel safe, or when they have a problem that they want to talk about in a relationship between family members, between coworkers, between children. I believe that, or I would think that the average person would be less likely to say, to be able to acknowledge, to be in a state of in awareness and mindfulness, to be able to say, I think that I need to use this script with you right now to feel better about what we want to talk about. That's what I mean about bridging the gap between we're having a problem, here's a tool to help solve the problem, to here's a tool that we can use before we even have a problem. And then moving from, and I think, Harville, you did touch on this, about the idea that it's like practicing, it's a skill. So ultimately, you won't be using the script. But in the beginning, you are using the script.
Can I go first?
Sure.
So actually, we do recommend it being used without saying it's a script. For example, Harville, every time we go to restaurants, he mirrors he goes, how are you, to the waiter? And the waiter will answer, and Harville will mirror him. I'm sitting there at the table, and he just likes to talk to the waiters. He always gets free desserts because he mirrors, and he's just, but he does all the sentence stems with the waiters. And you can act, and Harville gave this a name. It's called relational competency. At the checkout of Walmart, this stressed person is da-da-da, and to mirror them, and, if they say something to you, if you go, let me see if I've got it. We actually think you can spontaneously do this.
Mm-hmm.
And so the one other thing, and then I'll turn it over to you, it is so much fun to just do it and not say, by the way, I'm using a script. If you just do it, it puts you in another part of your brain, as Harville was saying. If you go through life from the upper brain, you release certain neurochemicals that the dorsolateral prefrontal cortex releases certain acetylcholine, norepinephrine, and it's the it's the Dalai Lama. It's the state. Dan Siegel, the most famous interpersonal neurobiology scientist, said, quote, "Tolerating ambiguity is a sign of brain health." Oh my goodness. And I called him, I said, I thought being smart was a sign of brain health. How can being dumb and not knowing, how can that be about brain health? And he began to explain it to me. But what's just come out is research that if you talk to people from the neocortex, that all the neurochemicals are so much calmer. It calms your body. And I've never seen statistics like this, JJ. It documents those people do not get sick as much as other people. You do not get the flu. You do not get colds and get run down if you talk from up here. And also they have documented you live longer.
I believe it.
But if you're mad, and you're agitated and anxious or whatever, anyway.
Yeah. So the question about how to teach it in non-intimate environments, I think, is the question that you're asking. And it's not. It can be presented as communication and connection and relationships. I'm asking about all of a sudden you're going to, when we're first learning the skill, we have to have the buy-in to, I'm going to use a script. I'm going to talk in a different way. I'm not going to go back and forth. And then you also might have the complaint from someone that says, but what if I'm angry and I really want to let that out? And what if I'm angry and I want you to know what I'm really angry about? And I don't want, am I supposed to stop myself in the middle of this trigger? I'm not mindful enough yet to stop myself in the trigger to go grab the script. So that's what I mean, making those connections. Well, I think that the people say that, and I think what's the appropriate response to that is, I get it that when you're angry, you don't want to have to invoke a skill to deal with your anger. You just want to deal with your anger. And what we want people to grow into is that you could go ahead and do your anger, but then you're going to have to clean up the mess that your anger made. So you may want to learn, Helen has a famous phrase, because you can't control your first thought, but you can control your second thought. And that means your first thought is going to come from your lower brain, but your second thought can come from your prefrontal cortex. And so what we would teach is to pause with the affect and go to your prefrontal cortex and ask yourself, what do I want that I'm not getting that I'm mad about? Mm-hmm. So it's like the frustration we call it, the frustration is a hidden wish. But I'm not going to deal with the wish, I'm just going to deal with the fact that I'm not getting it. Assuming that if I yell at people that I'm not getting it, then I'll get it. Well, that's fundamentally the pathology of everyday life. Freud talked about the psychopathology of everyday life. And that was how people don't know that what they're doing during everyday life is connected to their childhood. The pathology of everyday life is the belief that if I hurt you badly enough, you will love me, and that's absolutely an illusion. So we have to say to people to convert this into a request. So you get in touch with your affect, and you learn that when I'm mad, I know I want something. So we have to do some cognitive training about that when they're not mad. That's why we put them in a workshop, give them some information, and also give them a skill that is the dialogue process so that they know what to do. Most people don't, it's like, well, suppress your anger. They don't know anything else to do. So I'm not going to express my anger, but I don't know what to do. Well, there is something to do, which is, and you may want to pick up on this, ask for what you want instead of talking about what you don't want. But it requires training to know that you have that option. So when people then, this is why at the moment, if we go into a corporation, we use what we call a workshop model of 4 to 6 hours. So people can go through the experience, and then we break out of the 3-step process, mirroring, validating, and empathy. There are 6 sentence stems that we call the structure of that dialogue process. Is now a good time to talk? Did I get it? Is there more? And let me see if I got it all. You make sense. And I can imagine you might feel. There's sentence stems. And what Helen was just saying is that we are now teaching people to take this and learn how to have a talk about a topic, which is the 3 steps. But you're not always sitting down talking about a topic. You may be at a board meeting or business meeting or at a party. If you learn the sentence stems, and we ask people to start memorizing them exactly like we wrote them, and so you're at a party, you may not do a 3-step mirroring, validating, empathy process. You may just be at the bar and saying, hey, is now a good time to talk about how this party is going? In other words, you set boundaries and you make appointments. Or somebody might be talking to you and you would say, hey, let me see if I'm getting what you're saying. In other words, you do that and you don't have to go through the whole 3-step process. You just mirror that back and say, and the person says, am I getting what you're saying? And you have to do it without being mechanical so that they won't know you've just come from a seminar. But you can say it like that. Am I getting this? So if that's interesting, do you have more you want to say about that? Is there more about that? So you can do the curiosity piece. Once you memorize it, then it becomes like the tennis game. You can then play tennis when you pick up the racket, and you can play around with the tennis racket. Once you learn that there are several ways you can hit the ball, and it's all will go over the net. And you can do a backhand and all kinds of things, but you can't do anything unless you get the skill. So those are the 2 levels that we train. So when we call it taking a safe conversation into every conversation, or making every conversation safe by using the sentence stems randomly and as appropriate. So there are 2 things. I want to talk about a topic. So that means 10 or 15 minutes sitting down and talking about it, or 30 minutes or an hour, depending on how complicated it is. But then the micro interactions, 1 or 2 minutes when you're just having the flow of a conversation to pick up a sentence stem and use that. And that's what when Helen's talking about being in a restaurant, I don't do mirroring, validation, and empathy. I will give them an appreciation. Wow, thank you very much. This is a great presentation of this food. And you know what? They will come back to the table in a few minutes to see if everything is okay. But if you ignore them when they set it down, you're going to have to raise your hand to get them to come back. So, you have to be careful not to manipulate people with with this kind of social engagement, because you could. But you don't want to do that. You want to do that because you want them to really know you appreciate the fact that they are doing something really well and they're being noticed for it. And then they will come up and do more well. And Helen's raising her hand.
Can I weigh in about something?
Of course, yes.
Because Harville just said, Helen might comment on asking for what you want. So, JJ, what I tell people is there are 2 things that transform your relationship. One is if you handle your relationship from the upper brain. Instead of the lower brain is reactive. It can't help itself. Like it says, it gets triggered and have you ever, the next morning you go, I'm so sorry I said that. I didn't really mean it. I just flipped my lid. I went and literally flipped my lid. I went out of my mind. I just was crazy. The lower brain takes over. So number one, live life, live your relationship from your upper brain. And number two, learn to ask for what you want. Shift frustration into a wish. So the thing I would say about that is, guess what? People don't know what they want. They know what they don't like. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And they don't know how to ask for what they want using sender responsibility. So the definition of sender responsibility is that you say it, you make you express your wish, you ask for what you want, succinctly, with a calm tone of voice and a calm look in your eye. And if you learn to do that, your relationship, those two things, you can have a transformed relationship. But you may need to like go and see a therapist about, I know what drives me crazy. I just don't know how to express what it is I want in a way that your partner can do it. I mean, if you go, I just don't feel loved by you. I just don't feel like you love me anymore. Well, the person doesn't know what to do. But if you ask for, it would just mean a lot to me if, like, once a day, like maybe at noontime, you would text me and remind me that you love me. Just do a little quick text, and that would mean a whole lot to me. Or something that the other person can do, because then they begin to feel. I used to defeat Harville with all the things he was doing wrong. I would say, well, you don't do this, you don't do that. And he got defeated and went away. So it's important to begin to empower your partner to succeed at meeting your dreams.
And if I can add to what you just said, and you gave the example, I just want to underline it. People don't know what they want. And then finally, when they get to something, it's usually abstract, like, well, I want more kindness or more love. And you still don't know what to do. So you'll use your database in your own mind to give them more kindness. And for them, that will be insensitive. That doesn't touch me. So what you have to do is ask for what you want as a behavior, specific behavior, so that if I took a movie of it and showed it to a stranger, the stranger would know what you did. Like I want you to be kinder to me, and kindness would be, as Helen said, text me each day at noon with words, I love you. Okay, you can't get that wrong. I mean, you could do it wrong, but if you listen and do what was asked, then that's the behavior. And so people have a hard time turning an abstraction like love me into a behavior like text me each day at 1:00. Because when they say love me, they do have a behavior in mind. They just don't say it. And then sometimes we found they have no idea what a loving behavior would be like, when they would feel loved. So they have to, think about it and go through some experimenting. Well, maybe I would feel loved if you text me every day. And then they say, well, that's not doing it. And if you have a working relationship, the partner will say, well, tell me something else to experiment with. Well, why don't you send me a flower? So the person is looking for, they have a receptor, but they don't know what to put in the receptor. It's like a connector, the plug. You have to keep working until you get the right plug. So asking for what you want was one of Helen's genius come-ups with. And then the move to specificity was a part of my system because I'm a left brain. It's like I have to have a behavior that becomes quantifiable. The quality, yes, love me. Quantity is in what way? What behavior would do that? And then what that does, interestingly, is Helen's talking about brain integration. That integrates your brain too, because usually the wish will come from the right brain, where the affect and the feelings are, and you have to then access your left brain to know what would meet the needs that you felt in the right brain. So when you go back and forth between love me, well, maybe do it this way, maybe try it that way, your left brain is being exercised to put into operations the feelings and wishes of the right brain. And so you have brain integration between the two hemispheres, and you can also get brain integration from between the three lobes, the prefrontal and the midbrain and the lower brain. So any of these dialogical pieces, we're so excited about that because Helen had intuited years ago that dialogue changes the brain. And I was still in the psychological realm. I had not taken up neurophysiology at that time, and Helen did. She's been interested in the brain for a long time. But I began to follow her into thinking about that so that we began to be able to specify that dialogue integrates the brain, and here's how. Because you start off with an emotion, you can go to a thought, and then you do a behavior, or you start off with a thought, you can go to a feeling and a behavior, and all of that integrates the brain. And the value of that is the more you follow this structure, your brain becomes more integrated. It becomes less reactive to triggers that come from childhood. You'll feel the trigger still, but your brain won't go, wah! It'll go, oh, there's that trigger again. So let me now go into my prefrontal cortex to see what I want. I mean, let me use my prefrontal cortex to go to my right brain to see what I want, and then I'll use my behavioral system to put it into operation. So we're excited that we can teach people this, and we're being a little bit condensed and short here in this meeting, but let's say give us 2 days and to teach people these concepts and have them practice each concept so that they not only hear the words but do the behavior. And they begin to be like a great tennis player. We taught you about this muscle in your arm, and you practice using it, and now you know that when you enter into a conversation, you will be able to connect with that person without polarizing. And that's the goal of the whole process of safe conversation.
Well, I know what 2 days with you guys is like, so I would recommend everybody find your way to get to them for 2 days. And yes, we could continue because I had so many things I wanted to talk about, but I want to be mindful of time for you guys because I could keep you here all day. So I know that this work is, you have a goal. 3.2 billion, is that what we said? People on the planet you want to have do this. So let me help you spread that word. You have a live stream event coming up at the end of March where people can actually be on with you doing this work. And I believe all aspects of it are free. You have 90 couples you're looking for to do dialogue, and you're looking for it to be then shared globally, correct?
It'll be about a 4-hour workshop that will be streamed globally. Yes.
Yeah, 2 hours is like a you really can learn this in 4 hours, the way we teach it.
Yeah, because we give you 3 practice runs in those 4 hours so that you redo the process 3 times on 3 different topics. But we don't care about the topics. We just give people topics. What we care about is that they practice.
Yeah, you have to
the dialogue process.
In the days ahead.
Yeah. So if you help us fill the room with 90 couples, we will work with them for 4 hours, and we will stream it globally.
No problem. So because again, I'm correct in saying this is all free.
Yes.
Okay, great. All right. I can do this. I can help because there are people who want to do this work and they want to practice. Now, I want to go back to today's conversation is about safe conversations. Is this a couples dialogue only, or are we talking about any relationship can be 2 people practicing this script?
Yeah, it's any relationship. We have the couples was our, that's where it was all incubated. But when we took it out of the clinic, that was a couples practice, into the public. It's now going into corporations. We've just begun an opening into corporations. We've been into schools. We've been into congregations, houses of worship, all of where it's not, it may be dyadic, but it's not between just intimate partners. And we also have another thing that we call communologue, which is how to have a conversation in a group. So we can work with a group of 10, 20, 30, up to 40 people. 40 people would be about a 2-hour process. Better to have 20 people, but we can work with a group where they can learn to do this as a group conversation, which is really helpful in schools, where they can use it as a training process or as a planning process. Corporations, which are always having meetings, can use it to make their meetings work better, because if the meeting is safe, everybody's going to be more efficient. Kids in school, where the classroom is safe, learn better, make better grades. And so we're seeing this, and we have a project that's beginning in a hospital right now, where everybody in the hospital who interacts with the patients will use safe conversation with the patients. And so any ecosystem will be improved if they learn how to have a conversation that's safe. Then everything that's good about human beings can happen. If it's dangerous, then everything difficult about human beings happen. So we're hoping that this will eventually become the language of civilization.
Well, I want to help make that happen. So let's talk about where people can find out more information to either become one of those 90 couples or just to watch and be part of the presentation and the teachings and the workshop. So they would go to relationshipsfirst.com. .org, thank you. Relationshipsfirst.org, or they can go to harvillandhelen.com.
There'll be a link there to .org, so you can, either door will take you to the same place.
Okay, so even though we have literally scratched the surface of the questions that I had, I think it's been covered. I just want to reemphasize that the reason why you branched out into Safe Conversations was because the amount of success and work within the couples dialogue in Imago therapy then needed to move into other relationships and other dynamics, because as you said, if you don't feel seen or heard, or not even at first seen or heard, you don't feel safe to even talk, then there's not connection happening. And I know that the basis of the work is to create connection, and that safety is a necessary part of that connection, no matter who it's with. And so I really appreciate and am excited about Safe Conversations and using this in more places. Now, I know people can get the information from a lot of the Imago therapy in the workbook, and you're getting the love that you want. Is there a book or a pamphlet or anything that people can buy or download on Safe Conversations if they're interested in learning more right now?
There's a small book called The Space Between, and you can get that from Amazon.
It'd be a wonderful end of the year gift or beginning gift for 2020. Start the new year learning to know there's a space between two people, and the quality of your relationship is not about the person you're talking to, or it's not about you. It's about how two people handle the space between.
Okay, so everyone get the Space Between on Amazon and sign up for the relationshipsfirst.org live stream retreat happening at the end of March in 2020. More details, make sure to go to relationshipsfirst.org. Check the links in the show notes. That will lead you there. There will be a direct link there as well for you to sign up. So everyone check out relationshipsfirst.org. Sign up to be part of this. I will see you there. Harville and Helen, I know there's more to talk about. So hopefully when you guys get your show up and running, we can have you back on and try to help promote the show that you're going to be doing in the near future. I'd love to help you get that going too.
We'll have you on our show.
I would be honored. I would love it.
Yes,
wonderful.
That'll be fun.
Yes.
Thank you again for both being here.
We appreciate you, JJ.